G'day, welcome my friend to WTK, the What to Know show about abuse and grace by John Coyne. I'm your host, Peter Whalen. If you're from Brutnell or know someone from Brutnell, I think you'll enjoy reading Abuse and Grace. The author John Coyne was born there in the 1930s. And if you're 40 or older and from the surrounding areas like Cormac, Villeneuve, Killaloe, Eganville, or Barry's Bay, I imagine you'd also get a kick out of it. Anyone could enjoy Abuse and Grace, but when you know the people, it's more interesting. I laughed as soon as I read the title. I think it's a playful take on the hymn Amazing Grace, but if your name is Grace, you could be put off by it. Don't worry. It's actually a collection of John Coyne's memories, and it means he cares. Nothing in it struck me as truly abusive. I enjoyed it so much that I read all 336 pages in one weekend. I even took note of the page numbers of my favorite stories, and I'm going to share some of those with you. As you continue to watch, you'll decide for yourself if you want to read it. There's a book by Frank McCourt called Angela's Ashes about growing up in 1930s Ireland. And a lack of respect for his parents and anger permeated that book. It left me feeling sad. There's none of that here. It felt good to read Abuse and Grace. Mr. Coyne confesses his own sins, not other people's. He tells of the mistakes he's made, like single-handedly shutting down General Motors in Oshawa for a day. You'll want to read about that. On the back cover is the new graveyard in Brutnell. And when I was 15, I dug my dad's grave right there. And my dad didn't leave behind any writings. So I'm very grateful to John for writing this. He doesn't know me from Adam, but he knew my dad. And John's take on growing up in Brutnell is no doubt different than what my dad's would have been, but I imagine the gist of it is the same. It's a wonderful gift for me to read his memories of my dad and Uncle Billy, of my Aunt Mary before she married my Uncle Tommy. The front cover shows a fountain pen, which was commonly used. My dad told me that he would often use a feather quill as well, so we've come a long way in one generation. I dictate my notes to an iPhone. And when Jack was growing up, the water was pumped from a hand-dug well or pulled up on a pail at the end of a rope. In the winter, the temperature in Brutnell occasionally gets down to -40, but mostly it's around -10. So if the fire went out, you'd have to break the ice to wash your face. Brutnell was a ghost town when I was growing up. The Brutnell that John describes in the 30s was very different. There were hundreds more people and lots more things going on. Cars, running water, electricity, radio, and TV were all new additions through the 30s to 50s. He describes his grandfather John, who would throw a rip-roaring fit if the cows broke into the garden, as if the cows were trying to provoke him. When he was walking in the bush, his granddad would take it personal and get angry if a switch flew back and hit him. Well, I know how he felt. When I was little, my granddad would let go of a switch that got me right in the eye. It stung and my eye watered. I think I was mad for the rest of the day, even though my granddad kept apologizing and saying he didn't do it on purpose. Over 50 years later, I still think he might have. He was a bit of a joker. And that's the lesson of my own award-winning book, The Break. If you can't forgive someone, maybe it's because there's nothing to forgive. Abuse and Grace starts with one of John's earliest memories, his grandmother dying and being waked at home. And I related to that because one of my earliest memories is of my grandmother Molly Whalen being waked in our living room. There were no funeral parlors back then. And I didn't understand what dead meant. I asked my uncle why Grandma wouldn't wake up and play with me, and he just looked sad. In Brutnell, most of the homes were made of wood and heated by a wood-burning stove, which was used for cooking and heating of the water. Most everyone would also have a summer kitchen to avoid heating up the entire house. You were considered wealthy if you had 2 stoves, but most people took the stove from the main house and moved it to the summer kitchen, and in the fall they'd move it back. My Uncle Billy used to say, everyone was dirt poor and no one knew it. There would be a root cellar for storing potatoes for the winter. It might be as simple as a hole in the ground dug out under the house. And every kid would spend time removing the eyes from the potatoes, the sprouts. I did the same, so some things didn't change much. John writes of traveling by horse and buggy. It's a 20-minute drive to Eganville today on a paved road, but it was a 2-day round trip back then. It took all day to come back because it's mostly uphill. And he recalls using flour bags for pillowcases, which I had forgotten about. We did the same thing, 5 roses. John writes of his wind-up gramophone and for playing records, and a battery-powered telephone with also a hand crank. And the local switchboard operator was my grandmother, Molly. And that reminded me of the old party lines that I grew up with, where multiple families shared one phone line. You'd know if someone was trying to get a hold of you because there was a different ringtone for each family. There were 5 families on our party line, but it wasn't a problem. We didn't use the phone much. John attended the one-room schoolhouse filled with 30 students, and one student was responsible for firing up the school stove, and another would fetch water by the pail for everyone to drink. Most kids walked to school barefoot in warm weather, and if I was a year older, I would have went to that same one-room schoolhouse. I'm sorry I missed out on that. It was one of the last schools in Ontario where kids from 5 to 14 would all be taught by one teacher in one room. Butler's Catechism was one of the main texts, and I recall my dad being upset that we weren't using it in our school. On page 91, there was a teacher who often would beat the kids with a rubber strap, and eventually she was fired, and Mary Kelly was hired as the new school teacher. And John tells of how Mary got locked into the school one day as a prank. And apparently she just climbed out the window and didn't say a word about it, depriving the prankster of any satisfaction. And I can imagine her doing it. My Uncle Tommy would later marry her, and I remember her as a kind and strong woman. Here's some images of Brudenell. I met John at the dedication of the church steeple, which had been destroyed by fire from a lightning strike. We're 2 authors from Brudenell, so we exchanged our books. And coincidentally, we both married Filipino women from half a world away. The church bell was rung daily at 6 a.m. and 6 p.m., and you could hear it a mile away. In the 30s and 40s, there were no headphones or TVs to block out the world. Certainly there's no traffic. Our Lady of Angels Church is what the parish of Brudenell formed around. John went to confession in the same booth that I did. I did my sacraments from baptism to marriage in the church, and I'd like to have my funeral there too. At home, they used sticky ribbons for catching flies, and they'd fill up and turn black in a week. That hasn't changed. If you'd like to know what it's like growing up in Brudenell in the 1960s, you could go there now. It hasn't changed much. It's still dark enough to easily see the Milky Way. The summer air is still thick with mosquitoes. I don't miss them. And it's still a great place to go swimming, but the only lesson I had was sink or swim. There have been some changes though. Like when driving, I used to wave at everyone I'd meet, and I'd probably know them. I'd wave even if I didn't know them, and they would all wave back. And not so much anymore. Now most of the roads are paved, and people drive much faster than when it was a dirt road. If we saw a person walking on the side of the road, we'd offer them a lift. And it was funny in the 70s when people started jogging. My mom would pull up beside the guy jogging You look like you're in a hurry. Come on, hop in. And she'd keep going at it, yeah. My mom was superstitious, and I thought I'd heard them all. But John writes of one superstition where his brother had been bit by a dog, and there was talk of killing the dog so that he wouldn't get rabies. So the belief was, the superstition was, that if a dog got rabies after it bit you, that then you would get rabies too. But luckily for the dog, they decided to leave him be. And I was shocked to read that there were up to 20 altar boys serving Mass. It was down to less than 5 when I was an altar boy, and I'd often serve Mass all by myself. And I know what you're thinking, and no, I wasn't. Abusing Grace is packed with stories. Here's a few more that I enjoyed. On page 70, before the Second Vatican Council, it was required to fast from midnight onwards before receiving Holy Communion. The priest would announce the people whom he'd be visiting to deliver the sacrament during the week. He'd head out in the dead of winter, traveling for an hour or more in the cold just to do this by horse and buggy. He arrived at a distant farm where the son was sick, and instead of being greeted with, "Good morning, Father," or I'm sorry, Father," the mom's first words were, "The son of a bitch broke his fast." Can you imagine that? All that way for nothing and that greeting? There was a racetrack back then, but it was a swamp when I was growing up. My dad told me it used to be a race course, but I thought he was kidding. I couldn't imagine anything had been there. This is important. It was a common tragedy back then that every family would have at least one child die. But that didn't make it any easier than it would be for you today. And John's mom suffered the death of a child and then a miscarriage in the same year. And she slipped into a depression. And he describes a folk remedy of shock treatment of cold water. His mom would dump a bucket of cold water over herself every morning, and after a while, her depression lifted. So if you have that problem, it's free to try, and there's some research now to support that somehow that works. On page 160, I was proud to read that my grandfather Andrew was a skilled craftsman and talented shoemaker. Now, he died before I was born, so I knew nothing of him. He made my Uncle Billy a sleigh that was the envy of all the other riders. I'm happy to be reminded of the many expressions I grew up with, like "have a snort," "by jumping, holy lifting," "by the reefing ginger," and "shut your face." I stopped using those expressions when I moved to the city. Maybe I'll start using them again. I'm looking at you, Laurie. Page 219. This blew my mind. There were people flying from Killaloe to Ottawa before I was born. It's like finding there was high-speed internet. My sister's never been on a plane. On page 221, John's first job was picking stones for my dad for $2 a day. So I wonder what it was like to work with him. And on page 250, John later worked with my Uncle Billy, who loved to read, which is something Billy and I had in common. They worked on the building the hydro dams together as hoist operators, and there were quite a few deaths on those projects and no safety investigations back then. On page 259, I was shocked to read that there was no drinking of alcohol allowed in John's house. We had a 2-drink minimum. He recounts going to confession with Father Drone, who was going deaf. So confessing to him was like broadcasting your sins to the whole community. Like, amen. I said, I took the Lord's name in vain 3 times. Can you imagine that? Yeah. Bruton had lots of things that I never dreamt of, and they were all gone by the time I came along. Like, I never saw a pool table until I went to college. But according to John, there had been one in the parish hall and one in each of the barbershops in Killaloe. Even Hollywood movies were shown in the parish hall. It didn't last long because Father Drone didn't approve of some of the Hollywood scenes in the movies. John tells of my Aunt Margaret and Uncle Billy having him and his brother Mert over for dinner. She asked, do all Brudenellers think one bath a week is good enough? And Mert replied, take a bath in the winter? I think it was my Aunt Margaret who told me the one about the old man from Brudenell who would have a bath every Saturday night whether he needed it or not. There are lots of other stories in Abusing Grace. And if you want to get your own copy, check with the Eganville Leader or email me at whattoknow@peterwhelm.com and I'll let John know. I hope this inspires you to tell your own stories. It's sure to be a pleasure to someone, and you may not have any idea who. That's been my experience. So thank you so much, John, for taking the time to write this, and thanks to my sister Sandy for suggesting this show. I'll end this with Mr. Coyne's lines from his grade 2 play. I am quite small to go to school, but you can see I am no fool. I studied hard, my piece to say, so now I'll bow and go away.
That's fairly interesting. This is the What to Know Show with your host, Peter Wayland.